Welcome to the ABQ Accent, where catalysts, innovators, and risk takers share what their accent is on their work. Like a spoken accent, we all have an inflection or emphasis on where we put our energy. Join us to learn how these folks are putting their accents to work, building their vision of the future, and how you can get involved. Hello, and thank you so much for being here, Agnes. My name is Mariah Harrison. We've met before, and this is the ABQ Accent, and I'm pleased to have you.
Thank you for having me today.
Yeah. So for everybody listening or watching, Agnes Vallejos and I met technically over the phone and email, and I'm very pleased to discuss much more of her work here with the Department of Senior Affairs. She is the Strategic Program Manager for the City of Albuquerque Department of Senior Affairs, and it does sound like a lot, and it is. I think the work you do is really incredible and broad-reaching. So I'd like to discuss more about that. And I know that you're born and raised in northern New Mexico, but currently you live in Los Lunas, you work in Albuquerque. Your life is northern New Mexico.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit more about your background and what brought you to the city.
Sure. So I actually came to school at UNM, graduated from Los Alamos High School. And I am the youngest of 8 kids. My dad had a stroke when I was really young, and it really impacted me. And I didn't really want to leave too far from my parents because I knew that they would be older when I was younger. And so came to UNM, loved it. Go Lobos.
Go Lobos.
I graduated twice from the university.
Double
Lobo for sure. And fell in love with the city. Albuquerque is home. And, you said I live in Los Lunas, but sometimes I say that I sleep in Los Lunas and I live in Albuquerque because work is here and things are here. And, but it is a great city to be in. And it's close enough to the mountains. So when I get homesick and I need a 7,500 foot fix, it's easy to get back there.
It's like a solid 100 miles from the center of town to get to Los Alamos-ish.
Yeah. So crazy little story. I actually commuted up to Los Alamos for a bit when I first started working with older adults. Yeah. I opened an assisted living up in Los Alamos, thinking that we would relocate back to Los Alamos. Didn't work out quite that way, but made that commute for a couple years.
Yeah, you get used to it.
Yeah, for sure. And nothing like the sunsets and the sunrises as you're driving through Santa Fe.
It's a unique view. I think a lot of people don't even get up to that little corner sometimes of New Mexico. Yeah. So the assisted living, I think, might actually identify a couple pieces of your passion, and that is well-being, and that is older adults. Sure. So what do you do at the city? Like, what's maybe a typical day?
A typical day.
Yeah. Is there a typical
at the
day?
city?
And if there's not, that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think the best part of my job is that it's not fully defined. Mm-hmm. It's not, it does allow for us to sort of strike while the iron's hot. Mm-hmm. We get to, as opportunities arise and as they fit with the mission of the department, we get to pursue different things. And I get to lead the charge. I think stumbling into older adults, I actually started my career with younger kids. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I thought that, a funny story, my brother's an attorney and he's a little bit older than I am. And he, when I graduated from college, he said, you should get an MBA. And I said, Andy, I am going to save the world. Like, I don't have time for business school. Sure. And then 14 years later, I went back and got my MBA because, you can't only save the world, but and I thought I would always be with kids. I thought that was, really where I was going to be. I had an opportunity to work with older adults and found that it really is a calling. It really is a passion. And partly because there's so much wisdom there. Mm-hmm. There's so much lived experience. And they're always willing to tell you about it. Mm-hmm. They're always willing to, to educate you and help you, and mentor, and so working in assisted living where it was life or death every day was a little hard. Just to be honest, that was not, I have some friends that they thrive in that environment that they, and for me, this is a better, the advocacy side, the policy building side, the creating opportunities for people to live in dignity and to, to thrive in the community. And that's where the age-friendly stuff really resonates for me, because the nice thing about age-friendly, if I may, nice thing about age-friendly is that it's about making the city of Albuquerque livable for all ages, not just for older adults, but for all ages. We had a meeting the other day, and one of our committee members was telling me how hard it was for her to walk from the from the National Hispanic Cultural Center over to Barelas Coffee House to cross that street. Yeah. And I explained to her that it's not just about being older, that if that's a younger mother with a toddler and a baby in a stroller, that person's going to have the same struggle across that street. So when we stop pitting generations against each other and we start thinking about what's good for an 8-year-old is good for an 80-year-old, it's a pretty magical thing. And so that's one of the things I get to do is I get to marry that work with younger kids that I did for all those years with this work that I do with older adults. And there's so much that we don't have to compete around, that if we're planning and we're thinking thoughtfully about how to design program, how to design the city, how to make it more walkable, all those things, it's great.
I really love that perspective because it's very much like a growth mindset. And it's like, I would say multi-generational is another word for it, but it's really not, because you were trying to blur the lines and make the access for all. So that's a hot button for me, actually, Mariah, because people talk all the time about multi-generations, and it really is about intergenerational. There's a difference between, so we have multi-generational centers, right? Which are fantastic and state of the art and leading the way across the country. I mean, there's so many things about Albuquerque and New Mexico that we sell ourselves short around. And then when we get into a national platform, we realize we are so far ahead of the curve in a number of ways. Yeah.
And Department of Senior Affairs is really that. Our services are so robust compared to so many of my colleagues around the country. They really envy. But with that multi-generational approach, we have an opportunity to introduce younger kids to an older generation, which helps in so many ways. It helps with families that are apart and they don't see their grandparents, or they don't, their grandparent lives in New York and they live here, or, those kinds of stories. But what it really gets to, and what I love so much about it, is it helps us to address our sort of internalized ageism. One of the things that happens for seniors, for the department, is people will say, "Oh, I'm never going to go to a senior center." And it just breaks my heart, because when you get into a senior center or to a multi-generational center and you see the rock hounds, folks that are going out into the community or out into the wilderness and bringing back rocks, and then they're polishing them and they're making jewelry and they're doing all of these incredible things.
They're sharing their gifts.
Yeah, I wonder why would you never want to do that? And it boils down to their own internal implicit ageism around, I don't want to get old, because we've been told all of our lives that old means the wicked witch, the craggy woman with the,
or less than,
or less
in some
than.
way. Yeah,
exactly. And so that's the piece that I love so much about the intergenerational piece, is being able to recognize, like, I do want to get old. My grandmother died when she was 95.
Wow.
I want to get old.
Yeah, and you want the interaction of the intergeneration approach, but the ages as a whole. So I appreciate also that I spoke with someone from AARP recently, and he said, we're transitioning to using older adult instead of senior. So language matters
for sure,
and I think it's also powerful in your work too. And on that point, maybe you can talk a little bit about one of the latest topics our city's been working on, and that is housing. And so you've done some explicit work on how to support older adults in this place. Tell us about that.
So, what I thought was fascinating is there was this concept that, and we've all heard it, we're going to downsize, right? Like when we get older, we're going to just downsize, right? And with the rent crisis, with the housing crisis that we're experiencing nationwide, how the question became, some people very explicitly said, older people need to leave their homes so younger families can move in. Well, where are they going to go? Right. First of all. So let's say they leave their home that doesn't have a mortgage to get into a mortgage on a house that is more expensive than their home in a neighborhood that they don't know, that requires them to drive, right? Like all of those things. That wasn't the solution.
It's full of assumptions and unknowns and on inaccuracies.
Right.
Yeah.
And what we know works better is intergenerational, multi-generational communities.
Yes.
Where there's mixed housing, where there are folks that where there's younger kids that can see older people in the park, all of those things, right?
Yeah.
And so we wanted very much to incorporate our voice around the age-friendly piece of housing. And some of the work that preceded me we had made some introductions with planning.
Mm-hmm.
The more I got to meet my other family over at planning, because they're just amazing people.
They're great.
Yeah. That when, being able to say, how do we talk about this from an age-friendly perspective?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the wins was with Housing Forward was the casitas. And that is a very northern New Mexico. It's a very New Mexico solution to, my partner's family has 8 acres in Los Lunas. And now there are 4 families that live on those 8 acres. 2 of his brothers, his niece, his sister, because
classic.
Because that's what we do. We build that house, and then we built that house, and we built that house. So it wasn't a reach for us, and it was a great win. I think there's a lot more to do around housing, around the availability of housing. One of the things that we worked on first with Age Friendly was universal design. And what that means is, and this is what I love about it, because it's so democratic, right? It's just so, is if we build homes, for example, with no step into the house, right? That's good for an older adult who has a cane or, is aging into their house. It's good for a visitor who's in a wheelchair. Okay. It's good for a mom with their stroller. It is super age friendly to not build houses with tons of steps.
Universal design.
And and lower countertops and those kinds of things that make it easy to age in place so that you don't have to leave your community. You can stay in your home for 40 years if that's what you choose, right? Or even a new family can come in and it's still a welcoming place, right? That and those are not expensive. They're expensive when you have to retrofit.
Sure.
But they're not expensive to build in. And so if we can keep working on code and if we can keep working on policies around that, it saves us time and money in the long run. Yeah. But again, like I said, it just levels the playing field for everybody to not have to think about do I have to leave my home to be safe?
Good point. Yeah. Well, and leaving the home is the first thing we want to avoid if at all possible. Right. And I love that you're coming at it from several different points of view. That there's a challenge for such a large population right now, that to be able to have conversations with planning and also policy analysts and people who are making some decisions about codes in the city council and everybody else, it's powerful. Yeah, it's and just even sort of planting the seeds, right? Of and my boss will tell you that I'm a little bit of this much of a nerd. Love to read, like to see what other people are doing, and then I love to just borrow their ideas and see if we can scale it for here or see if what we can do. And so one of the ideas that's out there that hopefully we will get done more sooner than later is this concept of shared housing, which is helping partner people that live in a home that have excess space with people that need a room, right? I was at a focus group, it's been a while, but the gentleman was from UNM. He was trying to finish his degree and he had to move every 6 months in the previous 2 years because his rent kept going up with each lease. And what he said was, I am in near substandard housing for what I was paying when I first got here, right? And I asked him the question, would you feel comfortable living in a home with an older gentleman or an older woman, an older person? And he was like, I would love that, right? To have a kitchen, to have, and you talk to some older people and they would love it to have someone that can help them mow the yard or take out the garbage or have some camaraderie or some communication. There's models all over the country that I would love to bring here. I love that too. And there's it can't be impossible to find some matching way to do it. But no, there are actually lots of models out there. And, according to them,
they're having 100% success, like hardly any, because the issue always
turnover.
becomes, will the older person get exploited? How do we? And so these matching services literally are vetting landlords, right? Vetting the older person, but they're also vetting the people that want to, to rent a room from somebody. The first time I heard about this was from a nonprofit called, I might get the name wrong, but Hands Across New Mexico.
Okay. Yeah.
And their concept was taking foster kids that are aging out of foster care, and partnering them with older adults in their excess homes.
Oh, yeah.
They haven't been able to move as much as I think they would have liked to, but what a great concept. To really vulnerable, not necessarily weak vulnerability, but, underserved, let's say, folks, right?
Yeah.
Kind of helping each other out.
Well, and recognizing that gap, especially for those folks that are aging out. I know there's a number of different organizations that are working on addressing that, but if you've already got another population that sort of just, you can ease them into and build those relationships too, that's a lifelong relationship if it works out.
For sure. And that's what you read when you see some of these models. You see grant, and sometimes their age isn't even that big of a difference, right? Like it's just a home sharing concept with, two older women who, that may be, one downsized, one doesn't want to downsize, or, that kind of thing. And they become friends, and they have a partner in, that they can go to the movies with, or to the, to go hear some music, or, those kinds of things. It is a very powerful model that I just throw out into the universe as many times as I can. So we met with UNM to just kind of start talking about, how do we promote something like this? How do we, I talked to the UNM Retirees Association, and, the concept was kind of new, but a lot of them were like, yeah, I love living near the university. I miss contact with the students. It would be great.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the students are not, because that's the other thing I hear a lot is, but they're just going to be partying all night, and they're just going to, but we're talking about sometimes like graduate students, and especially with the housing crisis that we have.
It could be anybody.
It could be anybody.
Well, you keep throwing that out into the universe.
Right.
I love that. And thanks also for shouting out a nonprofit. Maybe we can get an update on their work and share that too. What else about what you're working on these days is energizing you? Is there something you have to look forward to this year? Is there a favorite project? I mean, the DSA is massive, really. I mean, there's everything from food support and the housing support, and then there's the senior centers, and then there's the external programs, there's IT support. I know that you partner with teen years, and you have volunteers from all over the city. That's a large question to ask you.
So the big part of my work right now is going to be updating our age-friendly action plan for the city. And it's been interesting because, sometimes when you write a plan, best intentions, right? You think, our plan had 8 goals, 8 domains, 8 goals in each. So 64 goals. It was quite ambitious.
Robust.
And then we had COVID, and then we had the housing crisis. And so we're paring it back. We're really looking at 3 main areas. We want to look at transportation. We want to look at economic development, particularly employment for older adults.
Great.
And housing. Housing, we can beat that drum about housing, but transportation is an interesting one to me because this department has Senior Affairs has a transportation program where we give rides. We give rides to and from the centers. We give rides to and from grocery stores, like all of those kinds of things. Transit is working on their transit forward plan and trying to figure out how to do. And all of those things are very age-friendly related, right? Because if we can improve transportation and if we can make it more accessible for folks, then they can, they can live where they need to live. They can get where they need to get. And it sort of democratizes things. So and
it ties into their economic equity too.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And one of the things is, when you start to scratch the surface, this is the thing I love most about the city is once you kind of start to dig a little bit, you start to understand all of the things, not all of the things, but many of the things. And so we have a Vision Zero plan, right? For zero accident, transportation
Pedestrian,
deaths,
yeah.
and not just pedestrian. That's another
Transportation.
thing. It's like crashes and
Okay.
all of it, right? I thought it was pedestrian too at first, and then we got a nice. Valerie Hermison was so great to come and talk with our group about it. But the idea is, so she's doing this, she's leading this charge, and it's fantastic. So we can incorporate that into the age-friendly action plan, and we can start moving, like convening the folks around stuff that's happening with Vision Zero, stuff that's happening with transit, stuff that's happening with our department, to see how we can all play nicely together, like how we can all collaborate and how we can, kind of elevate the dialogue. So the transportation, the one I'm mostly excited about, I'm really excited about is the economic development side. Yeah. One of the things that we all experienced, and you probably do in your department, but for sure in ours, is a couple of years ago, we used to get stacks of applications, right? This many applications. Now we don't get so many applications,
for utilizing the transportation.
For Employment Act. Okay. And we have these vacancies, these really hard to fill positions and stuff. But we have a lot of older adults who are not ready to retire, who maybe they don't want to because we're living longer, we're living healthier, right? We're aging well in most times, even though society will tell you we're not and that you should be afraid of getting old. The reality is 85% of people that, that are much older, 80s and above, still live at home,
on their own. Yeah.
Independently at home. Right. And we have this misconception that it's all downhill, you hit 40 and it's all downhill, but that's really not true. Right. I will just share with you, one of the national kind of speakers about this, his name's Chip Conley. He talks about the happiness curve, and the happiness curve really is like, we're happiest when we're young, like when we're still 2 and 3 and 5 and that our happiness drops off midlife and then it goes right back up. It's a smile. I like to think about that all the time. It's just this smile curve of happiness, right? As we get older, right? Our lives get more robust and better. And we don't have the same stresses as when we're in our middle years of family and working, right? And so, so we have many people who want to go back to work, but they don't want to go back full time. They want to go back because they have to make a little more money, but they can't make too much more money, right? And so we have some opportunities to talk about reskilling folks, retraining folks, getting folks that maybe have been underemployed back into the workforce. And the city's one of the biggest employers in the region, right? So we should start at home. Yeah,
I love that too. And I also think the Economic Development Department is putting a lot of effort behind their workforce development programming with CNM and otherwise. So
right, and we have a partner. It's New Mexico New. It was a new nonprofit that was started about 3 or 4 years ago, with the idea of how do we. NEW stands for New Elder World. Okay, and the concept was, how do we get people back into the workforce that want to, or that get them into volunteerism? And use their skills. It was started by a woman that had, Paula Getz is her name. She used to work at Oracle, and she retired back to New Mexico, also a Northern New Mexican friend here. But she had a hard time figuring out what to do next. And so New Mexico New just partnered with CNM Ingenuity. They took over the nonprofit, and they're really looking at a job board that employers can go on, and they can post for positions. People that are looking for jobs can go and look for jobs. What excites me about that is that we get to think about how to talk about the benefits of hiring older workers, the benefits of multi-generational. We have a multi-generational workforce already. And how do those older folks mentor the younger folks? How they talk a lot about that, before for folks that aren't, quote, digital natives, right? How did we network back in the day, right? Face to face, right? And we have a whole group of younger workers who that's a foreign concept to, because they network on LinkedIn or on Facebook or, those things. Yeah. And so working intergenerationally in the workforce creates a better bottom line, and it's proven over and over that healthier companies embrace that intergenerational, multi-generational approach.
Yeah.
And we have more babies. So my boss always laughs at me because I tell this story. I heard someone speak a number of years ago he was talking about baby boomers. And the example he gave was that before we had baby boomers, we didn't have disposable diapers. But because there were so many babies,
they had to do something else.
They had to do something. They had to innovate, right? And so baby boomers have innovated along the way.
Yeah.
And now they're part of the older generation. So they're going to innovate again, right? And it's going to be around work, because many of them didn't save, like we can have the doomsday, but many of them are healthy and they want to keep going. Yeah. They didn't retire like my dad, or my parents, whose lives were much different, right? And so I think we're going to see a lot in that realm. How can we create age-friendly employers here in the city? Yeah. So that's what excites me, and I can't wait to get going.
I like it too. So. I appreciate that. My dad's 81, and one of his concerns was that nobody would hire him, even with him and, thousands of other people, the wealth of knowledge, the compounded knowledge they have and experience that can improve a general workforce.
One of my favorite people in the whole world is a dad of a woman that I worked with for a long time. And he retired from GE, and he was an engineer, and he's brilliant and all of those things. And he found his calling in tutoring his grandson in the classroom. And that was, his grandson is now graduating from high school, and he's still in that same first grade classroom because they needed him. Yeah. They needed him to teach math. They needed him to, right? And he's, getting closer to 90. And yeah, I mean, that's what excites me, is how do we find those opportunities for people to continue to give and give back.
Well, I'll tell you just briefly, right next week, we're recognizing one outstanding foster grandparent who works with youth and had worked with youth, and she's 95 years old. Right. So it's just one example of the people who are still wanting to be a part of that. Yeah. So we have a little bit of time left, and I want to spend more energy on your outside of work life because you are vibrant and you're giving in so many different ways. So let's talk a little bit about what you do with the Anderson Alumni Council, and then also the New Mexico School for the Blind and Visually Impaired, because I know that you are the president of that.
I am right now. I am. So I was appointed to the New Mexico School for the Blind and Visually Impaired Board of Regents. I've been there 7 years. I had started with their foundation. I used to run the Alzheimer's Association here in the state for the state. And so I have a philanthropic background, and this was a fledgling foundation that needed some help. So Carlos and I adopted our granddaughter who has an acquired brain injury. So she's visually impaired. And so she went to the preschool here in Albuquerque, which again, best kept secrets, right?
Yes.
Who knew that the New Mexico School for the Blind and Visually Impaired is one of the #1 schools for the blind in the country. And our preschool is amazing. I call it the happiest place on earth because it's filled with amazing people that do amazing work with multiply impaired kids, and then just some kids that are not just, but are visually impaired. Yep. And so when she left, I said I cried twice at the school. I cried many more times than that, but I cried the day we had to drop her off. And then I cried the day she graduated from kindergarten because I wasn't sure what was going to happen next because they were so amazing. So this was one way I could give back, was by being on that foundation. And then from the foundation, I was appointed to the Board of Regents. And we have 2 schools. So the preschool's here in Albuquerque, and then our main campus is down in Alamogordo. Okay. People always think we're up in Santa Fe, but that's the school for the deaf. And they're constitutional schools. Right. So they're in the Constitution as places that should exist for these kids. The neat thing about an NMSBVI that I love so much is that they're everywhere. They understand that being in Alamogordo is hard for people. So they have a birth to 3 program where they're out in the community, and they're all over the place. So I love.
What are the ages they support?
So from birth to, they actually, kids can go there on an IEP until they're 21. The neat thing about the school down in Alamogordo is that They will allow kids to stay so that they can get employment services or employment training.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you this quick story because I love to tell stories. But at our end of the year board meeting last year, so this May last year, one of the seniors who decided to come back for an additional year, his name's Angel, he said he came and did a presentation for the Board of Regents, and he said that he wants to be a landscape architect. He's completely blind. And he made a tactile map of a garden that's a sensory garden. So smells, sounds, right? Different textures on the seating, different textures underneath your feet, those kinds of things. So he designed this garden. He asked the superintendent if he could have a piece of property on the, to do this to do this garden. And one of my colleagues on the board is blind, and she said the amount of detail that went into this map was like heads and like she wouldn't have ever expected it from an 18-year-old boy, right?
It's exciting.
But he put this together. He did this presentation. We asked him to come back and present to the other special schools. One of the regents for NIMI works for Shell, Chevron, one of the gas companies. Yeah. So they're fully funding his garden, right? And the New Mexico Military Institute is asking him to design the same garden for them.
I love it.
This is what can happen with networking, with just asking and putting people out there, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Clearly, there's a lot more to learn from you and to learn about the work that you're going to be doing. So maybe we'll do a follow-up.
Oh, I would love it.
Yeah. But before we leave, is there anything you'd like to leave our audience with in terms of messaging for, what is powerful for you about living and working around Albuquerque? Or if there's something you want them to get more engaged in?
One of the things, a couple of retreats ago, we did this icebreaker where there's about 250 people that work for Department of Senior Affairs, and they asked us to separate. So all the people that were born in Albuquerque moved this way. All the people in New Mexico this way, United States, out of the United States. And more than half of our staff went to the born in Albuquerque side.
Amazing.
This is a place where we call it a community for a lifetime. People love it here. Why wouldn't you? It's beautiful. It's, it's, we get a little windy, but, it's, 4 seasons. It's all of those things. It's such an amazing place. And so, that's what keeps me here. We have lots of opportunities always to go somewhere else, but there's nothing like it. And, so how do you get engaged? I think the first thing I would say is that, I think taking a look at internalized ageism, and deciding to say, instead of, oh my gosh, I'm getting so old, or you're over the hill, embracing aging. It's in our mission at the department, but that is my mantra these days is embrace it.
That's appreciated. Yeah. It's a little bit of a mental check and encourages you to get out of your comfort zone too.
For sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Awesome. I appreciate it. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us also today. And as usual, thank you so much to the Bloomstone for loaning us this beautiful Celestite. I will get it right in the caption. Thank you all and have a great day. Please come back for another ABQ Accents.